There's a test that most Americans will fail without even realizing they are taking it. Ask an American where their country ranks in quality of life compared to the rest of the world. They will say number 1, or top 5, maybe top 10 if they are being modest. Now show them the data. The United States ranks 31st, behind the Netherlands, behind Denmark, behind Luxembourg, Switzerland, Finland, Austria, Germany, Iceland, and Norway. Behind countries most Americans have never thought about, and behind a few they could not find on a map. Watch their face. That reaction, that confusion, that instinct to argue before they have even looked at the numbers is not ignorance. It is programming. It is what happens when an entire population is told from birth that they live in the greatest country on earth and is never once shown the data that says otherwise. Every country has propaganda. But most countries' propaganda is obvious. State-run media, portraits of dictators, a controlled internet. American propaganda is different. It does not look like propaganda. It looks like a bumper sticker. It sounds like a football game. It feels like pride. And that is what makes it the most effective in the world, because the propaganda you can see is the propaganda you can resist. The propaganda you mistake for patriotism is the propaganda that owns you. Here are 9 lies Americans are taught about their country and their world that the rest of the developed world finds absolutely insane. Number 1. The myth of the land of the free. Americans hear this phrase so often that it's become background noise. It's in the anthem, it's on the merchandise, it's in every political speech from every politician in every election. The United States is the freest country on earth. That's the claim. And most Americans believe it without ever checking whether it's true. It's not. The United States incarcerates more of its own citizens per capita than almost any other country on the planet. More than Russia, more than China, more than Iran, more than Cuba, more than the countries Americans are taught to fear and pity. Roughly 2 million people sit in American jails and prisons right now, and a disproportionate number of them are Black and Latino. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery except as punishment for crime, and the prison industrial complex exploited that loophole to build a system where incarcerated people work for pennies per hour, generating billions for private corporations. The land of the free has the largest prison population in the developed world, and it profits from keeping them locked up. On press freedom, the United States does not crack the top 50. Reporters Without Borders ranks at 57th in the world, below countries most Americans could not find on a map. On the Cato Institute's Human Freedom Index, and this is a libertarian think tank, not a leftist organization, multiple countries outrank America in both personal and economic freedom. On the 2026 Numbeo Quality of Life Index, the Netherlands ranks first, followed by Denmark, Luxembourg, Switzerland, Finland, Austria, Germany, Iceland, and Norway. The United States does not appear anywhere near the top 10. On a broader quality of life comparison using 45 factors across 147 countries, the United States ranks 31st. The countries that actually rank highest in freedom, quality of life, and human development are the same countries American politicians dismiss as socialist. That is not a coincidence. That is the propaganda working. Number 2, the countries America calls enemies are outbuilding America. Americans are taught that China is a backwards authoritarian state that copies American innovation and can't compete on the world stage. There are real and legitimate criticisms of China's government. But on infrastructure, the comparison is humiliating and not for China. China has built over 45,000 kilometers of dedicated high-speed rail in roughly 15 years. Trains travel at over 300 miles per hour. You can cross 800 miles from Beijing to Shanghai in about 4.5 hours, on a train smooth enough to balance a coin on the surface. The United States, in that same time period, has completed 0 high-speed rail lines. America's fastest train, the Acela, hits 150 miles per hour for a few minutes on a small stretch of aging track shared with freight trains. America's first real high-speed rail line is not expected to open until at least 2028. China invested over $2.3 trillion in infrastructure in a single recent year. America's once-in-a-generation infrastructure bill allocated $1.2 trillion spread over 5 years. China spends roughly 10 times more than the United States on infrastructure as a percentage of GDP, according to data cited by the Council on Foreign Relations. Only 5 American airports rank in the world's top 50. American passenger trains average half the speed of European high-speed rail. The country Americans are taught to look down on is building the future. The country Americans are taught to be proud of is patching potholes on roads built 60 years ago. Number 3. The countries Americans call socialist are the happiest and freest on earth. When an American politician suggests universal health care, free university education, or paid parental leave, someone inevitably calls it socialism. The word is used like a weapon designed to shut down the conversation before it starts. But the countries that actually have these policies are not socialist dystopias. They are consistently ranked as the happiest, healthiest, freest, and most prosperous nations on earth. Denmark has universal health care, free university education, paid parental leave, and one of the strongest social safety nets in the world. It also ranks number 1 or 2 on virtually every quality of life, happiness, and freedom index. Norway sits at the top of the UN Human Development Index. Finland has been ranked the happiest country on earth for multiple years running and has the best education system in the world. Sweden, Germany, the Netherlands, Canada, and Australia all provide the services that American politicians call socialist, and all of them outrank America on the metrics that actually measure how well a country serves its people. These countries are capitalist democracies. They have free markets, private businesses, billionaires, and stock exchanges. They just also have governments that treat healthcare, education, and basic security as rights, not products to be sold at maximum price. Americans are taught this model does not work. The data says it works better than what America has. Now, if this is the kind of content that challenges what you were taught and makes you question what you have been told, subscribe to this channel right now. Turn on notifications and drop a comment telling me which of these comparisons hit you the hardest. That engagement is how we keep making content like this. Let's keep going. Number 4. American police kill more people than police in virtually every other developed nation combined. This is not a small difference. This is a systemic problem. In 2025, American police killed 1,202 people. That is a slight decline from 2024's record high of 1,270. In the first 3 months of 2026 alone, 201 more people were killed. In the same period, police in England and Wales, serving a population of roughly 60 million people, fatally shot 2, not 200, not 20, 2. To make that comparison even sharper, California alone, a single American state with a population of 39 million, saw police fatally shoot 143 people in 2025. One American state produced more police killings than entire European nations do in a decade. Across 13 European Union countries combined, including Spain, France, and Germany, 488 people died in police custody or police operations over a 3-year period from 2020 to 2022. America exceeds that number in a single year, every year, 94% of those killed by American police in 2025 died from gunshot wounds. 29% were actively fleeing. 11% were unarmed. Roughly 1 in 5 showed signs of mental illness. Black Americans make up 12% of the population, but account for 24% of those killed by police. Officers were charged with a crime in fewer than 1% of cases. Other developed countries train their police for 2 to 3 years minimum. Many American police academies run 6 months or less. Other countries emphasize de-escalation. American policing culture treats every encounter as a potential combat situation. And Americans have been so conditioned to accept this that they defend the system even when the body count proves it is broken. Number 5. America has normalized mass shootings to a degree the rest of the world cannot comprehend. 95% of American public schools conduct active shooter drills. At least 37 states require them by law. Children as young as 5 are taught to lock doors, turn off lights, hide under desks, and stay silent. Anxiety, stress, and depression among students increase by roughly 40% following these drills. According to a study that analyzed 54 million social media posts across 33 states. Some countries, including Canada, have adopted lockdown drills partly because they share a border with the country that produces more school shootings than any other developed nation. But in the UK, Germany, France, Japan, Scandinavia, South Korea, and most of the developed world, these drills do not exist because the problem they prepare for essentially does not exist at that scale. Australia had a mass shooting in 1996, changed its gun laws, and the problem largely stopped. The United Kingdom did the same after Dunblane. These countries decided children's lives were worth more than unrestricted gun access. America decided the opposite and then built an entire system around teaching children how to survive the decision it made. Nearly 400,000 American students have been exposed to gun violence in schools since Columbine in 1999. That is not a statistic from a war zone. That is from a country that calls itself the greatest on earth. Number 6. Support our troops is a silencing mechanism, not a policy. In most developed democracies, opposing a war does not mean you hate the soldiers fighting it. In America, those two things have been deliberately fused. The phrase, "support our troops," has been weaponized to shut down any criticism of military policy, military spending, or military intervention. Criticize the defense budget, and they say you hate the troops. Question a war, and they say you hate the troops. Point out that veterans are homeless, underfunded, and committing suicide at staggering rates, and somehow you are still accused of hating the troops. The irony is devastating. The people who wave the biggest flags and shout "support our troops" the loudest are often the same people who vote against veterans' health care bills, against mental health funding for returning soldiers, and against expanding benefits for military families. Meanwhile, military recruiters have permanent access to American high schools. They set up tables in cafeterias, attend career fairs, and specifically target low-income schools where students have fewer options. The No Child Left Behind Act required schools to hand over student contact information to military recruiters or lose federal funding. An 18-year-old who cannot legally buy a beer can sign a military contract because a recruiter convinced them in their school cafeteria that the military was their best path to a college degree. In Germany, Sweden, or Norway, recruiting children inside their own schools would cause a national scandal. In America, it is part of the system. A country that will not fund its children's education will absolutely recruit them into the military from inside the school it refused to fund. And it calls that freedom. Like this video right now. Share it with someone who needs to see these comparisons. Leave a comment telling me this. If you could move to any country tomorrow, would you still choose America? Now let's finish this. Number 7. The greatest country in the world chant. Americans are the only people in the developed world who regularly and publicly declare their country the greatest on earth. Politicians say it in every speech. It is assumed in conversation. It is treated as so obvious that questioning it is treated as treason. But on virtually every measurable metric, it is not true. The United States ranks 31st in quality of life, 57th in press freedom, and trails most of Western Europe in social mobility. It ranks last among developed nations in healthcare outcomes and first in incarceration. It has the highest maternal mortality rate in the developed world and the highest rate of child poverty among wealthy nations. It spends more on healthcare with worse results, and it spends more on education while producing lower test scores. The greatest country chant is not a celebration of facts. It is a sedative. Because a population that believes it already lives in the greatest country on earth will never demand that it become great. The chant replaces action. It substitutes feeling for fact, and it ensures that the people who could push for change instead spend their energy defending a ranking that does not exist. Number 8. Americans think speaking one language is normal. Most of the developed world is bilingual or multilingual. In Europe, learning 2 or 3 languages is standard. In much of Africa and Asia, people speak their local language, plus a trade language, plus often a third. Americans are among the only people in the developed world who overwhelmingly speak only one language and feel no embarrassment about it. In fact, there is active hostility toward other languages. The phrase, "Speak English, this is America," exists at a scale you do not see in other countries. Monolingualism is not just a personal limitation, it is a structural one. A population that only speaks one language can only consume one country's media, one country's perspective, one country's narrative. They cannot read Danish newspapers writing about American healthcare. They cannot watch German journalists discussing American infrastructure. They cannot access the information that would let them see how the rest of the world actually lives and what they actually think of America. Isolation is what makes every other form of propaganda on this list possible. If Americans could read what the rest of the world writes about them in languages they cannot understand, the greatest country on earth myth would collapse overnight. Number 9. The self-made man doesn't exist. The pulled myself up by my bootstraps. Mythology is one of the most psychologically damaging pieces of American propaganda. It teaches people that success is entirely individual, and failure is entirely personal. If you're rich, you earned it. If you're poor, you didn't work hard enough. And if the system failed you, the problem is you, not the system. This framing ignores inherited wealth, family connections, zip code, race, access to healthcare, access to education, and the reality that the zip code a person is born in predicts their economic outcome more reliably than their work ethic. A child born into the bottom 20% of income in America has roughly an 8% chance of reaching the top 20%. In Denmark, that number is nearly double. The American dream is more achievable in other countries than in America. The myth of the self-made man doesn't just distort reality, it prevents Americans from demanding structural change because it teaches them the system is fair. If the system is fair and you are still struggling, the problem must be you. That's the same psychological mechanism that keeps people in cults. It convinces them the system is perfect, and any suffering is their own fault. 9 lies. America isn't in the top 10 for quality of life. China's infrastructure is a generation ahead. The countries Americans call socialist are the happiest and freest on earth. American police kill at rates that would be considered a human rights crisis anywhere else. American children are trained to survive mass shootings because the country chose guns over children. The Support Our Troops slogan silences criticism while veterans go homeless. The greatest country chant is a sedative. Americans speak one language in a world that speaks three. And the self-made man is a myth designed to make people blame themselves instead of the system. None of this is anti-American. All of it is pro-truth. And the difference between the two is the difference between a country that gets better and a country that stagnates while chanting about how great it already is. Thank you for watching. If this video showed you something your education left out, that is not an attack on your country. That is the education your country owed you. If you want more content that holds power accountable and treats you like an adult who can handle the truth, subscribe to this channel. Hit the bell. Share this with someone who still thinks asking questions is unpatriotic. We will see you in the next one. Reason over rituals. Always.